Hey, it's Ryan Speltz, and welcome to another episode of One Man's Journey podcast. Today, I am super excited to have Jason Frazier on. He, for me, has been a guiding light in the mortgage industry and just somebody to really pay attention to and follow. He's a father of three, a husband, the founder of the Broker Journey, and an executive coach at 2020 Vision for Success. And the accolades and the amount of things that you've piled up over your career is just fascinating. I'm excited to hear, the challenges that you've overcome and what you do on a daily basis to remain focused when you've got all of those things going on. So I'm going to hand it over to you. I'd love to hear kind of whatever story you'd like to tell, and we'll jump in with some themes after the fact. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, hey Ryan, thanks for having me on. Excited to share this stuff because I generally just talk about business. Really, I don't really get into personal stuff, even though that's obviously a big driver of my purpose and who I am. But as you mentioned, father of three, husband, and I guess what I could do is just kind of start my story, and then we could jump in with some stuff, kind of like you mentioned. And so for those that don't know me, I've been in the industry since '09, and but I was born into the mortgage industry. So my mom is or she's retired now. But a family business. We owned Mason McDuffie Mortgage, which was founded in 1887 in Berkeley, California, and it was a family business. And she actually worked there, worked her way up before ownership as an employee, and she started as a receptionist, and she worked all the way up to be the first woman CEO of a mortgage bank in the United States. And that happened in the I believe it was '79 or '80. And I grew up around mortgage professionals. I grew up around loan officers, mortgage people, all of that, like family real estate. So it was part of my daily life growing up. Now I went a different route because my mom always told me not to get involved in the mortgage industry. She said, don't ever follow my footsteps. Don't ever join the mortgage industry. Of course, just like most kids, I don't listen to my parents and just kind of do my own thing. But I am an engineer by trade. I did that, getting out of school. My first job was selling software. And I did that. And sales is actually, I don't really enjoy sales. I was good at it and good at, kind of the marketing aspect, but I just didn't enjoy it. It just wasn't for me. I like to build things. And so getting into engineering, and I got that through selling software, got into technology. The highest certification that I held was the CCIE, which is the Cisco Certified Internet Expert, building multi-million-dollar networks cross country. I worked for during that kind of upbringing in the technology world. I was a director of IT, CIO, senior vice president. Ran my own consulting firm as an integrator for technology, in the early 2000s. And then one of my clients at that time was Peter Thiel and Clarion Capital. So Peter Thiel, who you may know, founder of PayPal, was one of my clients. And then I joined them as their SVP, or at the time as the director of IT. And then also, over a few years, was promoted to senior vice president. And so that's kind of like where I came from. And then I took a sabbatical in the beginning of '09. I made quite a bit of money, so I didn't really need to work if I didn't want to. I lasted about 2 weeks, played golf a lot, and I just was bored out of my mind. I'm not someone that's kind of built to just not do things. So I started philanthropy work through nonprofits, churches, shelters that with technology related needs, computers, that type of stuff, just to help, because it was just easy to do. I was on discussion boards and channels of helping people with their technology questions, and all of just free of charge, because it just kind of kept me kept me involved, kept my brain working on things. And I was just kind of deciding, I was thinking about writing a book, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And at the time, the mortgage company, my family, were owners of that company. And They were trying to do something different. They wanted to build something different than what other mortgage lenders were doing. And so I had originally helped them build their technology plant in the beginning. And then my cousin, who's actually still runs their technology today, took over. And then they brought me in as a consultant in '09 to kind of go over what they were doing and to do an audit of their systems and all that other stuff. And then I became a consultant and started working for them. And then they brought me on full time towards the end of 2009, and I was there for basically a decade. And during that time, I became their CIO. I also became their CMO. And their chief strategy officer. So I held all three C-level positions at the same time. And working with loan officers, I ran the consumer direct piece of the business. And I really started to get into marketing in. I would say I was in marketing earlier because at the time social media wasn't really a thing in the mortgage industry where I came from. Obviously, Peter Thiel being the first investor in Facebook, so I grew up with those guys, and which is called the PayPal Mafia. So we always kind of refer to ourselves, the people that work for Peter, as kind of like the child of the PayPal Mafia, because we worked with a lot of the different companies. LinkedIn, I consulted for them in the very beginning before they were even LinkedIn. Palantir, some companies that you may know that are publicly traded now. That I was kind of there in the beginning, and so I took all of that knowledge of just being around those guys and kind of brought that into what we were doing at the mortgage company, and helped with talking to loan officers and agents about social media, Facebook, that type of stuff. And at that time, everyone, every loan officer, every agent said they were never going to get any business from social media. It was going to be, a fad and bada 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 bada, and all the stuff that we always do in our industry whenever something new comes around, right? And so in 2016, I decided to really go all in on the marketing front. And actually, I have to thank Gary Vaynerchuk. Actually, take a step back. Actually, I have to thank a friend of mine, Katie Lance, who's a pretty big name on the real estate side. And she gave me a book, Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. I read it. I was like, oh, this dude's awesome. Like it spoke to me. And so I ended up meeting him at a conference where he kind of hung around and talked to people after he did his keynote. And this was back in 2016, San Diego. Remember it vividly because it was a great conversation. And it was from then that I decided to go all in on kind of creating my personal brand, and through that helping our company brand better and get more business and whatnot. And so I used Snapchat as the vehicle for that, because Snapchat was the TikTok at the time, right? And so that was like the cutting edge. And at the time there was people like, how are you going to get business off Snapchat? Blah 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 blah. As it turns out, you can get business off anything if you know what you're doing. You understand humans. You understand neuromarketing to a certain extent, and you know how to do marketing. And so so I was able to do something that very few companies were able to do at the time, and that's actually generate business from Snapchat. And that parlayed into speaking and all these other things that I did. And I built a good brand for myself, and I decided to leave the family company and go out on my own, do my own thing, which I did. For running a education, marketing, kind of content program, and then speaking and doing those types of jobs, or jobs, so to speak, but events, getting paid to speak. And then eventually I got back into the lending space, and from then I've worked at Cardinal Financial, EPM, and consulted with other companies like UWM and Caliber and Home Point as a consultant, and then worked for Victorian Finance for a little bit, and then really decided that I want to focus on consulting, coaching, and speaking, and doing using my experience and expertise, and getting into the day-to-day to help loan officers, especially in a market where they need it the most, to help them find success.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear your path of, like you said, early in your career, right? You were born into the PayPal Mafia. Really, like
Yeah. Yep.
you put yourself in there, and
Mhm.
so you saw eventual, obviously massive success from those people, and you are related to those people in that sense. And
Yeah.
just watching your journey, like I think you are quite possibly one of the most humble people I've met in the regard of like you're not using that as you're lording over other people of like, hey, I've seen it, you should listen to me. It's more of like, let's talk about what you're experiencing and and make a solution out of it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that lends to one thing that I've been recognizing, and when you just said it, I recognize it even more, is the engineering piece of that. It's that like having that engineering brain and applying it to other people's brains.
Yeah.
And I think you're doing a fantastic job of that. What do you think? Like, do you think that that is the reason that you enjoy the neuro part of it, or like because it is so scientific in that regard, or like what takes you down the path of like the marketing piece? Because I think throughout the theme of that is like that's your favorite part, is the marketing piece of and the building the systems of the marketing and all of that stuff. And the systems have to be based off of that neuro piece. So is that like where that drive, do you think that's where it comes from?
I think from a little bit, and I think, and I think you're on. I think what you boil it down to is as an engineer, you're given your job is to solve problems, right? That's what you do as an engineer. If you didn't have problems, then an engineer would not be needed, right? Like engineers are to fix problems, also to build, obviously, but ultimately you're solving problems. And solving problems, when I was little, I was huge on becoming an architect. Legos were a big thing. So building, being an architect, right? That mentality of building, because to me, when you build something, you're leaving a legacy, right? And my purpose is to make an impact and leave a legacy in this world, right? And whatever I happen to be doing. Because because guys, look, when it comes down to it, and I think about this more as I get older. But like, if you think about how many times do you actively think, like, you have to do a lot in this world to be remembered, right? And look, when I'm dead and gone, there may be some people that are younger that, whatever, and then maybe there's something that I create down the road that gets, and that's how mortgage marketing ends up being, like, that's the foundation of all mortgage marketing, and it's the Frazier methodology or whatever, right? Unless there's something like that, you pass out of existence, right? Like, you pass that, other than your family, right? You pass out of memory. And I always wanted to leave some sort of legacy, and not just for myself but for my kids, or something, and future generations that will know me from nothing, of my family, to leave something, because it was important to me. And this gets in a little bit, of really what drives me. But to answer your question, it's the problem solving problems that gets into the neuromarketing, because that's really what marketing is you're solving a revenue problem, right? Or a sales problem. And I think what's made me an effective marketer is the fact that, and not what I think, what I know has made me an effective marketer. One is that, but also two is because most marketers that you meet, they don't know how to, like, use technology, right? Can they use, like, a web app and stuff like that? Sure, right? But as far as, like, I could build out a website, I could integrate it with Zapier, I could do the entire. That's why I call myself a full stack marketer, because I could control and manage the entire stack, right? Whereas a lot of marketers can do, like, SEO great, but they wouldn't be able to integrate lead forms and do that and create the copy, create the subject lines to make sure that these triggers fire out. They're not going to be able to do all that. They're going to have to hire out. And I think that's been my superpowers because of my engineering. I enjoy doing that. So, like, building is great and it's fun. And then adding the marketing layer on top of that I think is what made me successful in marketing. But ultimately, if I look back on the driver of me, and I don't share this too much. In fact, I've only shared this really once before. So, and that was with just a small group of people, but is my background, right? And I'm not going to pretend like I had some, like, troubled childhood or some, like, really, like, some adverse conditions, as a lot of people have had out there. But just like any upbringing, it's, there's challenges and adversity, but it was really more of the lessons of my parents and my family, who had true adversity. My mom's side of the family being born in, dirt poor Muncie, Indiana. My dad's side is, I'm Native American, which, some people know, some people don't. My dad, so I'm 50%. My dad's 100%, or was. He passed when I was a teenager, but born on the reservation, right? So he's born on the res. Um, Played dirt, right? Played with, his toys were like dirt and bugs and stuff like that. So like, he had a very, rough childhood upbringing compared to like what a lot of people deal with. And for me, is being Native American is something that's very important to me. I don't let it define me as far as like the political aspects and what a lot of people do when it comes to like their heritage and things of that nature. But native, it's an important part of who I am. It's in my, it's my DNA. It's part of me. And in my family, as far as like being successful, it was important because my mom was kind of like the success story of the family, right? Not that her brothers weren't successful, but a lot of people came to her because she was an executive, she was in business, she was the first woman to break ceilings and do all these things, and she made a lot of money, and so like, so she was, in our family, she was kind of like the go-to, right? And so, that was my lesson, for, kind of pulling yourself up from nothing to have success. Work ethic I learned from her. Just kind of, dealing with people's bullshit and stuff like that, going through all of that. I learned from her as well. But that's what drove me, is that, in my family there isn't a lot of those types of success stories, right? And I'm not saying my cousins and stuff aren't successful. What I'm saying is there was a lot of, look, alcoholism and being a Native American, that's a very prevalent on my dad's side of the family, and people that, are just working 9 to 5, which, hey, if they're happy, they're happy. But as far as like what you considered like kind of like that American success story really resonated with me. And so I have taken it as incumbent on me is to be that like my mom was, right? So that I'm the one that people go to in my generation of family of like, hey, this guy, and I could count on Jason to do this and that, um and so that's a driver for me is I am very competitive, I am very ambitious. Those did not manifest themselves well when I was young, because when I decided to get into the corporate world and I got into the banking hedge fund world, right? I had an ego. Look, everyone's got an ego, I still do have an ego. That it messes with you a little bit, right? When you think that you're better than other people, and when you think as for me, my purpose was, by the time I was 30, I wanted to be an executive. And I had that driven. Now I got there earlier. I got there when I was 28. But that was very ambitious, and I lead. And at that time, I did not care who I ran over to get to that. Now, I'm not saying I was like a jerk, or I was like being nefarious, or like stabbing people in the back for it. But if you were in the way of me getting to what I wanted, I was going to win that battle, and I didn't care about feelings or anything else, right? Not to say that I wasn't like a good guy or, whatever, but I had lost my way a little bit, and of who I am, because I am a man of faith, and it doesn't make me perfect, but it is understanding that I'm imperfect, and understanding that I have to be a model for my children, right? Of who I want them to see in their eyes. And so if I look back on my late 20s, and at the time, another driver was I had my son at a very young age, at 20, my firstborn, Nick. And so, that drove me, and I wanted to provide for him. So while the rest of my crew that I grew up with were, messing around in their 20s and having fun, like I was working like all day, going to school at night. I was doing a lot of different things to create a better life for my son. And, that will make you grow up real quick, but it also will make you be a little bit too tunnel vision into success and ambition. And so I was not a good boss. I expected the people that were underneath me. I don't even call it boss. Let me put it this way. I was a boss and not a leader. Right. So that's probably the better way to put it. I was definitely a boss and not a leader. And so I was probably not great to work under, because I expected people to do what I did. If I worked for 36 hours straight and slept in my office, I expected my people to do the same. Right. And because even though I was getting paid a very good amount and, whatnot to do all that stuff, I did that shit when I was getting paid $34,000 a year. right? That's how I achieved, is because I did more than what other people did. I didn't worry about what I got paid. I worried about what I put out and what I could gain from that. And I learned a lot over the years through that. So I was a different person in my 20s, and I think we could all say that we were different people when we were younger and whatnot. But as a young executive and a young leader, definitely was different. And but all of that, just kind of like my ambition to be the best, to be like my mom, to create a name for myself and do all of these things. Those were my real drivers at the time. And my purpose has always been the same, and that's to leave a legacy and impact. And that manifested itself in sometimes good ways, as I believe it does now, as opposed to the negative ways as it did back then. And you never really lose that part of you either, right? And you never, and nor do you want that, because you want to learn those lessons, right? You want to learn the lessons of being humbled, of failing. You want to learn those lessons, and one is you don't want to repeat them, but two is that you want to hope that they make you a better person, right? Not just for you, but for your family, for the people that you lead. And as I came up more, and we talked about this when we went in, is that I've been knocked down, right? I've had some pretty starch failures. I've had some pretty, not, and some of them are known, some of them are not known, and I don't talk, not that I'm hiding it from anyone, but it's just not just common stuff. And so the post that we talked about prior to going live on here was when I talked about in November, 3 years ago in November. In fact, it probably been 3 years ago, probably a couple of days ago. I got knocked down pretty hard, and it was something that I just didn't. It threw me through a loop, and so I made a call to Christine Beckwith, who at the time was. She still is, but obviously I work with her at 2020 Vision. But she was a friend, and she was my coach, and so I called her, and she gave me the right blueprint to get myself back up, and the right words that I needed to hear at that time. Mostly also understanding that it was my fault, right? All just like everyone needs to understand, that is like whatever's happening in your life is really your responsibility, is you're accountable, because it's all based off your choices, right? Doesn't mean that there's not outside factors, right? So I don't look, if you're getting not going into detail, but like if something's happening to you externally by someone else, obviously that's not your fault. However, you got to take accountable for the choices that put yourself into those positions. So it's really about taking accountability and responsibility for yourself. And it took time to build back up. I had built up a pretty good rep that took a hit a little bit based off of some of the things that were happening. And without going into detail, a lot of that. But the point is that, it took me time to build myself back up. It took me time to kind of like shake that stuff off. And now thinking, hey, this is 3 years ago, going into 4 years ago. I'm the better for it, right? And all of that is as you mentioned, and which I appreciate. Being humble, I try to think of myself as being a humble person. I try to be a humble person. I'm definitely not perfect. There are the old me doesn't ever go away. There's things there. But one is I solve problems and I help people. I've made that try to kind of the cornerstone of my personal brand, outside of different first, better, second. But I'm a contrarian. I do not go with the flow. I'm not a status quo guy. I'm definitely, I have definitely rubbed people the wrong way in this industry. I speak my mind. But it's all for the betterment, because I want this, because my livelihood, my purpose goes away if this industry goes away, right? So I have an invested interest in loan officers and the lenders to be good and to endure and to be around in a decade, right? Because that is what my purpose is to serve that population. And so I'm not going to sit quiet when I see things that should be changed, or things that I think need to be changed. And look, I will say that that's what's made me stand out probably from other people. I get that message all the time when when people say, look, I love that you said that. You say a lot of stuff that we all wish we could say but are afraid to, or whatever. And it's not like that I'm looking for that type of rep, but it's just, look, some things need to be said. I think we need to be a little bit more upfront and honest about this, because this industry definitely is different, and you do need the right. You need the right tribe. You need the right people around you to be successful. And there's a lot of people in here that are in it for themselves. Everyone's got an agenda, including myself, right? But I try to use mine for more, positivity and good, than I do for my own personal gain. But I'm a human. Human interest is important. It's how I feed my family. It's how I do everything that I want to do to leave a legacy. But I try to do right. I try to do what's best, and I'm not always going to hit that mark. Sometimes I'm going to come off as an asshole or a jerk, and I just have to accept that that's they're going to be that way, and I can't change that about what if people think of me that way. But what I can say is that from the people that I do help, and the emails and the messages and stuff that I get every single day, it's for those people that have said, like, hey, I listened to this podcast, or you spoke at an event, or it was a webinar, and it's changed my life. It changed my business, right? And I'm not saying that I have, countless of those, but I only need one, right? I only need, as a human being, be able to help one person change their life for the better, right? And if I've done that, I've done more than a lot of people do in this life. But I want to do more. I want to help more people. I want to make more of an impact. And that's really what, at the end of the day, like I said, my purpose is to leave a legacy and make an impact. And that is, the ultimate driver of who I am.
Yeah, I think that's really what the core of the entire podcast is about, is like making that impact on one person. With my journey of being, through sobriety for about 2.5 years now, like there's a lot of realization that comes with that. There's a lot of realization that comes when you wake up, right? And I know that you're awake, and it's you mentioned the contrarian piece. One of the things that I always look at, like when I'm looking at your posts, I'm not going, man, I wish I could say that. I'm saying, man, he really said that in a way that I wish I could say it. Because like, while you're being contrarian, somehow with your understanding of neuro, you're working in like this like soft entry to it at the same time. So it's not just like, the people that you're seeing on social media now, like these big, these macho guys that are coming out and saying these crazy things that people are getting responses from. You're saying crazy things, but you're saying them in a way that goes, oh yeah, I think I could look at it that way. And I think like that's the most important piece. And that's what people don't really understand right now, is like there's a lot of hurt in our industry right now. There's a lot of freaking pain. Like everybody is in pain. And even a lot of the big guys, like whether their pain hurts as much as the small guy is not the case. Like it's just, there's pain. And so if you're constantly throwing out like these daggers that are cutting through people, you're not gaining anything by that. But if you can say it in a way that makes them think about it and have them recognize it for themselves, that's the key. And you do a really, really good job of doing that. And I think that, like, if we're taking one thing from the way you market or the way you get out there and say things, that's got to be the thing. It's like, how can you say what you want to say without crushing the person you're saying it
to? Yeah, look, it's a fine line to walk. But I mean, you couldn't be more right on. I mean, there's a lot of, look, this industry, and this is what I always try to explain to everyone that's not in the mortgage industry. Like the mortgage industry, because I've served in other verticals, right? I've served insurance, I've served technology, software learning. I've been in a lot of different verticals and industries, and what I could tell you is that there is nothing that I have personally experienced like the mortgage industry. It is a very small, tight knit community. There's a lot of cliques, a lot of camps, a lot of, squads, so to speak, right? There's a lot of people out there, and it's very, I don't even know what the word is for it, but it's a very, I guess, close knit is probably the best way to put it. And so what I tell people when they try to get in the mortgage industry and they try to approach it differently, and I have this conversation all the time with, like, private equity firms or hedge funds or people that are trying to invest in solutions coming in. I said, look, guys, like I've seen so many people waste millions, hundreds of millions of dollars trying to enter this space because they don't understand the industry. And only when they get into it and they realize like I can't even break in, like this was easy in all these other verticals or easier, and I get in this and I can't get any traction. And it's tough. And when it comes to like, the hurt is because a lot of the, unfortunately a lot of people will, like I said, with agendas, people will work to divide people. And sometimes it's unintentional. Sometimes they're trying to get their point across and maybe they just don't know how to replay it. But there's a lot of division that happens, especially now. And it gets compounded when you have a downturn in a market, right? And everyone's struggling and everyone's looking for that silver bullet and everyone's kind of like, paying attention to the ghosts of the past of how they used to do this and how I used to do that. And so it's, if you look at any type of evolution or revolution in history, you look at the people that people respond to, right? And a lot of times those aren't the best people to listen to, right? They're the people that were the loudest, but they're speaking the message of the people that are going to respond to that. So it's easy. And so what I always talk about is you got to choose the hard piece of it. You got to choose your hard, which is something that I don't, someone had mentioned that, years ago. It's probably, was either a podcast or a book or something like that where, maybe it might have been Tim Grover, but someone said, choose your hard, right? And it may have been Andy Frisella. And the easy thing to do is to go along with the crowd. The easy thing to do is to do what you've always done. The easy thing to do is to be the status quo, is to do the same thing. That's the easy stuff to do. It's easy to raise your hand and agree and say, yeah, blah, 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 that sucks and all that stuff. It's hard to be a contrarian. It's hard to go the other way, right? It's hard to do what needs to be done. It's hard to put in, double the time of work for less business than what you're used to doing. It's hard to do all those things. It's easy to give up. It's easy to quit. It's easy to do all of those things, right? But it's hard to stay in it. And so, my message to everyone now is like, be careful of who you're listening to. Be careful of who you're emulating, because that may be good for now, but it may not be good for the long term. And ultimately, you got to do what's going to be best for your long-term legacy in this business, if you plan on being in this business for legacy, like I do. Right now, if you're just in it, you got into it because you can make a quick buck, and you're like, hey, loan officers can make a lot of money by not working that. I'm not saying that's my opinion. I'm just saying when we saw the flood of people coming in because they thought everything was easy money, and then when things turn around, like they realize how hard this business is, and this industry is not for the weak. And so I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, get pulled in with I wouldn't say the wrong crowd, but with the wrong mindset or the wrong narrative, and end up paying the price for it and only realizing it later. So, one thing that I learned a long time ago, God, this is probably best thing I've heard ever, going back, probably 15 years, 20 years maybe, is that everything's a situation, right? No one is all the time good or all the time bad, right? It's everything is a situation, right? And so the more that you understand that and then take people as they are, because one thing that I think that has been a superpower of mine, other than being like a connector in the industry, is to be neutral, right? Is to be Switzerland when it is. And right now there's I don't care if I have friends that don't like each other, right? I have people that really, really dislike each other, but I'm cool with them and I'm cool with them. I take people as how they treat me and what they've done for me and what I do for them, right? That's all I care about. Now, obviously, I don't want people to be mean to other people, and I would love it if everyone got along, and that's just not real life. But I'm able to kind of walk that path where I have people that are on opposite ends of the spectrum that absolutely hate each other, but I'm able to be, cool with them, and they're, call them colleagues, friends, acquaintances, whatever. And that's the line that I want to walk. Right now, there's also people that don't like me, and there's people in the industry that I don't like. Right. And so I don't go around and talk crap about them. I just don't deal with them. I don't put myself in situations where that's going to be an issue. Right. And I'll always be professional. So if there's been events at people that I've spoke at where other speakers are people that I vastly dislike and I think are bad for the industry. But I don't go around talking about it. I don't go around like this. If we're in an event, I'm shaking hands, taking a picture. That's great. right? And I just kind of removed myself for that. So, what I would say to everyone is like, look, like, get out of your own head when it comes to that stuff. Align yourself with the right people, right? Find your tribes, absolutely, but don't get dragged around with a lot of the stuff that's happening right now, because I think you're going to find that it will end up doing you a disservice, either personally or professionally.
I think a lot of that comes from, and it leads towards, with your response of that kind of stuff and being able to be that person that both, you can be friends with both sides, right? The real reasoning behind that is because of your intelligence is leading, right? And you're leading with the understanding of all of it, instead of just like, and I actually posted a video a couple of days ago about this, where it's like everyone will make a snap judgment to seem intelligent. Yep. But intelligence isn't knowing the answer when it's asked. Intelligence can also show through as like, no, I don't really have an opinion on that, but let me do some research and I'll formulate one. And I think you're extremely good at that, and that's why you're able to play that kind of middle fence, because you understand the right side, and not to go right and left political wise, but that's where, I got two hands here. So, yep. You understand the right hand, you understand the left hand, and you can lean to both sides and say, yes, I understand where you're coming from. Here's what I understand about it. And whether that fits them or it doesn't, there's probably a little bit of both, right? That fits into that opinion. And I think that, like, that's what you're driving towards here, is the polarity aspect of everything. And if you're creating polarity, it's going to take you a long time to get you back to that center if the idea or the trend switches back over to the other side. Yep. So if you just kind of hang out in the middle and believe in what you believe in, and you may force a little bit this way and then force a little bit back the other way, you can be maneuverable, you can be flexible, and you don't have to chase the trend, because you are the trend.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic to watch just the, on your Facebook posts and stuff, just watching the crazy come out of so many people because they've already dug their heels in based off of limited information.
Well, yeah. And as someone that's, strategy is an important part, being a strategist is, something that, I take great pride in, because and a lot of this goes back to my upbringing of being really focused on wars and generals and strategic plans and all of that. I'm a big movie buff in general, but especially when it comes to like World War II and Roman Empire and all just all the major empires and generals and leaders of the world when it came to warfare. One thing that I learned through that is, when you talk about the crazy, is that I think people need to start changing the word belief with ideas. Ideas can be changed, right? But if you have a belief, that isn't like I believe that breathing oxygen is going to keep me alive, right? I believe that water is essential for me, right? It's when you believe something, those don't change easily. But if you have an idea, right, like that's something that can be changed. That's something that you could debate and talk about. And I think the problem with a lot of what you're talking about is, when people come in, is they have their if you are unable to change your mind, you're not going to be as successful as you could have been. Not saying you can't be successful, you can be very successful, but you're not going to be as successful as you could have been if you have the ability to change your mind. Some of the greatest successes and things that I've had was because I allowed my mind to get changed. Some of the things that have saved me from making the wrong decision is because I allowed myself to have my mind change. Because unfortunately, a lot of people, look, nobody wants to be wrong, but when you change your mind, you are actually kind of partnering that with being wrong, and no one wants to admit when they're wrong, right? And so I think that's what we need to do more of this in this industry, is everyone needs to have ideas and be able to debate them and talk about them, as opposed to getting emotional and it's about a belief to where like, I'm going to die on this hill that X, Y, that loan limit posts are going to be the thing that saves my business, and yada yada yada, and we're running into that time now. And I think I've done my job well. When I get messages, when people post about it, when people tag me in loan limit posts and stuff like that, it means that I have done what I came here to do, right? Like, I've come to get people to think about it, right? To maybe change about it. And now I got other people, more than I've ever seen, post about, oh, that doing the same thing that I talked about years ago and doing it now. And again, it's great, right? I'm not saying like, hey, I started that. What I'm saying is that I just like the fact that people are thinking differently about this stuff now, because I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying it could be better, it could be more effective, and you can make it work better to your benefit if you think differently about things.
Yeah, my recent pull through to get some of this and kind of flesh out some of the people on the timeline that haven't really developed their thought processes around it. And it's a really quick question. It's 3 letters. Why? And if you ask them why and you watch them, what their response is, if they're not responding with fact, but they're responding with, well, that's because that's what it is. Like, it's so obvious to pull it out of them. And even in person, like asking people why, it's you will flesh out the ideas that they haven't really thought about instantly, because they really don't know the answer to that. So then it instantly goes, okay, walls are up. I have to protect myself because he's attacking my thought process.
Yep.
And really, it's just me like, well, what, why do you think that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so fun to watch people just like squirm and backpedal, like
Yeah.
because like I said, like I one of the things that I've pulled from you is being able to formulate your opinion and ask yourself why, right? So now you've asked that question before you even get in front of other people, and so if somebody asks you that, you're not defensive, you're going, well, here's why, and you've actually developed a reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
So that, like I say, knowing who you are, I truly appreciate you coming on, spending the time with us today, and getting to know you a little bit deeper, a little bit more about who you are instead of just what you do. So I appreciate you coming on, and I'd love to have you back, because I think we can, with those engineer brains that we both have here, I think we could probably flesh out and solve quite a few of world's problems. But
yeah, I'm always up for it, man, and I appreciate you having me on. And these are good conversations to have, because I don't really have them that much, and it's good to kind of open up and talk about, kind of the personal stuff and the things that drive me, because I think, not just me, but the other guests that you have on here, because I learn from that too. Like, I like hearing the personal stories and what drives other people, because because if I'm doing it right, I'm taking that and looking at myself and realizing where there's some synergies, or where there's some things that I should have a different perspective on. Because if you're not learning, trying to learn something new every day, you're gonna become stagnant.
all right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and we will see you on the next one. And just remember, you're not the only one.